Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, comrades and friends, salam alaikum. My sincere apologies that I will speak in English. I am still trying to learn Arabic. I hope one day I will be able to deliver a speech in Arabic. My discussion, I was told that I should talk about illicit trafficking of heritage assets, particularly the issues related to documentation. Unfortunately, when I was listening to the first presentations, quite a lot of the issues I was going to discuss came about. I hope I will be able to give you a different interpretation or different angle based on my own experience and working on this subject. I do have two edited books on restitution. The first one is on Africa, and the second one is on the restitution in the world. They are both published by Routledge, and you can find them on the website. The first one for Africa, it's edited with George Abungu, and then the other one is edited with a colleague of mine from Australia, and we try to cover a number of issues. But before I go into illicit trafficking, let me perhaps explain what am I doing, or what are we doing at ICESCO. Basically, our thrust within the Heritage Center is to try and build the capacity of our member states so that they can effectively manage their heritage assets. And when I refer to heritage assets, I'm trying to say that it's not just sites, it's not just artifacts, it's also intangible heritage, and that also includes a documented heritage as well. The one we find in libraries and places like that, it is a very important aspect of our heritage. So our thrust basically is effective management. And the major issue which I think we also want to do, because heritage effects, heritage work is being done by many enterprises, by many organizations. What we want to try and avoid is duplication. If other organizations are doing other things, we would want not to do that, unless if we can work together. And that's what I'll be showing you in a few minutes. One of my major concerns is that we do have 9 member states within the 53 members who do not have a single site on the World Heritage List. And my idea is that at least within the shortest period of time, we need to have them on that list. The Heritage Center has got perhaps 3 main flagship programs which we are trying to implement. And the first and probably the biggest or the flagship is promoting and profiling all Islamic heritage, or should I put it this way, all heritage found within the Islamic world. It could be archaeological, it could be architectural, it could be something to do with the spiritual and issues like that. It is our concern. The second flagship is, as I've already indicated, trying to improve the management of these sites so that member states can benefit from their management. We don't just want to manage sites, but we want them to benefit from them. And then, well, not the last, but one of our main issues is that there are so many issues affecting heritage, and we want to be able to tackle some of them. For example, conflict I think I'll come back to conflict many times as one of those things which is affecting the management of heritage. There is also climate, which is affecting the way our heritage is being managed and is being, if you like, utilized, and how people can benefit from that. And of course, there are other disasters which I will indicate. If I go into perhaps deeper into these flagship programs, you will find that, for example, promoting heritage of the Islamic world, one of our flagship things in there is registering the Islamic heritage on our register. And our aim, from the DG's aim, is to make sure that we have about 1,000 registered on this list. You might say that, well, aren't you duplicating what World Heritage is doing? No, we are not duplicating. We are actually working with World Heritage. The Islamic Heritage List can help the countries themselves to nominate sites to World Heritage. We work together, like what I said. We try and not duplicate, but we want to promote that heritage which is found in the Islamic world. And that's why that issue. Under that program, we also have the youth engagement and making sure that the youth take forward the protection of heritage. The future is about the youth. They will inherit and they will continue to benefit from them. In terms of world heritage in the Islamic world, we also have one of the things which we started yesterday, which is trying to look at the sites which have been listed on the danger list within the World Heritage List. And it's alarming, as the DG pointed out yesterday, that we have so many sites and yet so few on the list, so many of them on the danger list. 33 out of 56. That's a big number. We need to make sure that we reduce it, if we can, to zero. But of course, zero is impossible. Some of these sites have been on the list for the past 20 years, and therefore we may not be able to do that. The other issue is sustainability. We want to make sure that as you look after the sites, you also benefit from what you are doing. There's no point in just looking after a site without getting something out of it. One of my experiences in the last 7 or so years, I've been working in Italy and in Rome. You will notice that the economy of Italy is heritage. There's nothing else. Everybody, whether it's the taxi driver or whoever, they know the importance of heritage because their life depends on it. And nobody's going to destroy heritage in Italy just like that, because they can see the benefits of this. Not only the people, the biggest budget of the Italian government is not the Ministry of Defense. It is the Ministry of Culture. I don't know any other country which is like that. But what I'm saying is that we need to make sure that heritage is of benefit to people. It's of benefit to the government and everybody in that country. And we have to demonstrate it through our programs. Of course, AI and IT are issues which we are also grappling with. We don't want to be left behind. We want to be part and parcel of what is going on in the world. We want to be part of the world. Then the issue of heritage concerns, I've already mentioned the issue of conflict, what is happening. Our region, unfortunately, is one of those regions which is being affected by conflict. And I'll come back to this when I talk about illicit trade. It's affected by conflict, and we have to make sure that heritage is protected during that time. One of our interests under the Heritage Center programs is illicit trafficking of cultural property. Here, I'm talking about all cultural property. It is this workshop is of importance to us because a lot of cultural property is being stolen from us, and we may never know about what is happening in different parts of the world. And generally, museums is also another major issue. I would say that I've traveled all over the world. I've visited many museums. And I can safely say that of all the museums I've seen, the best museums I've seen are in the Arab world. They may not know it, but the best education museum I've seen is in Qatar. I have not seen any other museum which is like that except in Qatar. There are others in Oman, UAE, and all that, but I'm just mentioning it because, remember I said, the future is the youth. And if our museums can play a part in developing our youth, I think this is important, and particularly making sure that they're not left behind by other parts of the world. Of course, we have the Hajj route and historic mosque project, which we are continuing, and hopefully in a few years' time, we'll be able to nominate it to World Heritage. As I have said, one of the things which, in my language, I speak a language called Shona, and there's a very good saying, which they always say that if you want to go fast, just go alone. But if you really want to go far and achieve greatness, you go with others. And in our program, we want to work with the member states, but also with other partners, ICOMOS, IUCN, ICROM. We are already in the process of trying to make agreements and MOUs so that we can develop heritage as we go on. Yesterday, we signed an agreement with the African World Heritage Fund to try and develop heritage within Africa. In January, I think we will be signing another agreement with Bahrain to develop heritage within the Arab world. And of course, we work with ICESCO and other places. Universities are key because training happens at university. We can have workshops, we can have training programs, but unless the training is entrenched in the university as part of the disciplines, we are going nowhere. We need to make sure that we work with universities to make sure that whatever we are doing, the capacity building we are doing, lasts for long. Let me come to illicit trafficking in cultural property. I think it has already been pointed out that there are issues which come out of there. Crime, tax evasion, even the financing of some of the conflicts in our areas. One of the major issues is that it is illicit trafficking. It is not controlled trafficking. So there's quite a lot of underhand which actually goes on when this trade is going on. Some of the things we may not even know that they're happening. We may not even know that this heritage exists. And again, I'll come back to the issue of documentation, which is important for us to be able to know what exactly are we looking after. This, again, here I've shown you a map of the world, but particularly with the countries of the Islamic world. Generally speaking, the illicit trafficking comes from the south and it goes to the north, right? I want to qualify that because at times, even within the north, it happens. Korea, Japan, there's quite a lot of illicit trafficking which went on there. I think 2 days ago, we were being told about the British Prime Minister going to Greece to try and sort out the Parthenon marbles. Hopefully, finally, they'll go back home, but I'm not sure about that. This is something which is always being discussed and all that. But it also shows the importance of our cultural assets, that they are part and parcel of the diplomatic world. Because heritage is about our identity, it becomes something which is very critical in terms of negotiations and so forth. Some people call it soft power. I'm not sure. It's real power. It's not soft power. Heritage is real power, if you think of it. Again, I've already said that the major destination of illicit trafficking is actually Europe. That's where most of these things end up. Those are the rich people who can afford to pay any amount for whatever they want. And they control the cultural market, the art market. If we can regulate that, I think we will have solved part of our problem. Unfortunately, it's an underworld market which we don't really need to know. I think we also need to make sure that we understand the different local and regional entities. We may think that the same interest on this object, which the UK is placing on it, is the same as the country of origin. It may not, as I am about to demonstrate. There are different nuances in different regions of what is important as an artifact, what is important as a heritage. I would even say there's a heritage site. For us, perhaps it might be something different, but it does not necessarily follow that for everyone that artifact is important. Here is what I mean. When I grew up in a Christian country, or what was purported to be a Christian country. The word voodoo was associated with witchcraft. The word voodoo was associated with backwardness. And for many years, I didn't want to hear anything about voodoo until I visited French and British museums. I found voodoo artifacts, objects, stored in those museums, being exhibited in those museums. But I was told never to be associated with voodoo. And this has necessitated me to explore, research the whole issue of voodoo. What I found out was that voodoo is a good African religion practiced in West Africa. And here I have a photo of the Palace of Voodoo in Benin, in Porto Novo, which is being promoted. So there is a cultural value being put on the artifacts of the voodoo today. But there is another element. About 5 years ago, the French decided to return some of the voodoo artifacts to Burkina Faso. They built a museum and they brought the artifacts because these artifacts were taken before 1900. Of course, from the ethnographic discussions, they could identify the ethnic group and the if you like, the chief of that group. They brought them to the opening of this museum and showing them all these objects. You know what happened? The chief said, these are not our objects. Today, we use objects made of plastic. We don't use these things here, right? We don't know where you took them. They are not ours. I'm just trying to emphasize the fact that we, as experts, at times we assume that we represent our people in terms of what artifacts we should bring back, what was stolen what is being stolen. But at times, we are far from what we actually, the communities mean by that. Again, these are points which were already raised. The issue of strengthening legal frameworks in countries of origin so that the artifacts don't move away from there easily. And also countries of destination, which is very difficult because you can't tell France or UK to say that change your legislation so that it reflects the interests of the Moroccan artifacts which were stolen. They would not do that, right? So it's a catch-22 situation. How do we make sure that we strengthen the legal instruments? And does strengthening legal instruments mean protecting the artifacts? Not necessarily. I'm sorry, I'm not a lawyer. I'm what do you call it, a heritage person. Maybe I might be too critical of law, but I think we also know where laws are coming from. And this is what the next point is, that at times local communities don't understand the law. If it's a Roman Dutch law, it may not necessarily reflect what actually the community itself wants to see. For them, if you took my artifact, bring it back. There's no need to sign other documents and all that. We want our artifacts back, right? But legislation tells us, oh no, you have to get permission from this and permission from that. But hang on a minute, if you steal my car, do I now need to come and say to you, let's sign an agreement so that you bring back my car? I need my car, right? But with artifacts, it looks like we have to negotiate, and perhaps international agencies need to get in touch. But again, I heard the issue of UNIDWA, and I've been in many training courses of UNIDWA and all that. I still think that the reason why a lot of countries have not signed those agreements, the 1970 convention, UNIDWA, to be a member of UNIDWA, is basic. If I'm in Europe, I don't want to lose the artifacts, right? If I'm from the southern part, you are getting me into legal issues which I may not even understand, right? And this is why, in my view, the 1970 convention and UNIDWA still have probably some of the lowest adherences, because you are touching on people's identities. You are also touching on, if you are going to return after 100 years, after 200 years, what are you going to give me? You have deprived me of my heritage. I need something out of it. But they are not going to do that. Of course, the answer in terms of practice, we need to make sure that we have correct databases which can keep the inventories of what has left us. But that is if we know what has left us. Because some of these things, you only discover that, oh, this came from Kenya. How? What is it? What was it used? It came from Kenya in 1800. Yes, it belongs to Kenya, but we are not really sure what it is about, which means you have deprived us of something of this heritage. I've already mentioned the fact that one of the major, and again it was mentioned, one of the major reasons why we have illicit trade. Just this morning, if you checked on the news, on the internet, artifacts were stolen yesterday in Syria. We are celebrating that the war in Syria has ended. But in actual fact, what has happened when the war ended? When people are still in confusion, artifacts have been stolen. The heritage of Syria has been stolen. I can say the same thing with Sudan. When I went to Sudan about 2 years ago, I was able to see some of the artifacts which were taken from the Aswan Dam. And you remember it was the Aswan Dam which led to the 1972 convention, right? And these were tons and tons and tons of artifacts. Somebody was telling me about a month ago that a lot of those artifacts have disappeared. Conflict, war is a major reason why we have this. We have to make sure that there is peace before we stop illicit trading of cultural property. As long as there's war, things are going on, soldiers on their own take things and put them in their pocket. They don't even tell anybody. Nobody has documented it. Nobody knows where it has been taken. How do we stop that? By ensuring that there's peace. There is also another major issue which I am not very sure we can solve. That is poverty. When communities are in poverty, they can be exploited. Artifacts can be stolen. Artifacts can be sold for a song. Until we have made sure that there's no poverty, particularly in the third world or in the south, maybe we can begin to have a system of protecting heritage. Without solving poverty, illicit trade of artifacts, of heritage artifacts, heritage assets is going to be a reality because people want something to eat before they start thinking of, oh, I need to leave something for my kids, for my heritage, and issues like that. So poverty is one of the major issues. Of course, now the digital divide has come in. It is, of course, an advantage that we can probably document, we can send the message, we can also make sure that people are aware of what is happening. But that digital advantage has got its own disadvantages. It basically means you have to keep abreast. Because even those who exercise illicit trafficking, they are far ahead in digital technology. They will use it to their advantage. Because this is a lot of money. It's not some small change which we can do. Again, I just thought I should touch on this issue of documentation because she told me to mention something about documentation. Of course, you cannot protect something which you don't know. You must know the thing. But what is important, in my view, it is not the form, it is not the design, it is not the object itself, but it is the value of the object. This is why, in Burkina Faso, this community could say it's not our object, because they no longer know the value of these things. They are no longer part of it. But if we can document the value of the object, it basically means then we know what it is and we know how we can protect it. Otherwise, even this issue of taking objects out of our countries for many years, it means at times they lose their value, like what happened in Burkina Faso, which I think was not a good thing. Now, I have already mentioned the fact that objects are used in diplomacy. But at times it becomes a little bit, I don't know what the correct word to use. I'm sure we all celebrated when we heard that Macron was going to return the objects to Benin. I think he was going to return something like 52 objects out of, I don't know, thousands of objects. And this was a good gesture. Papers and papers were written about that. But do you know why he gave them those objects? There was an agreement, a trade agreement, which allowed France to use the ports in Cotonou, in Benin. And as a thank you, he says, I'll give you your objects. I will return the objects to you. And yet, these are objects. Why did you take them in the first place? Now it's almost like you are saying, I'm being Father Christmas because we have given you access to ports. But this is how objects or assets, heritage assets, are at times used. They are not used as the most important thing, but as an afterthought of what it is. And I think until these objects become central to our lives, which I think they are, then they will always be treated like, oh, okay, I can give you some freebies, some sweets. We need, of course, to strengthen cooperation amongst ourselves. We need to control the market itself. And until we can control the market, it's almost impossible for us to do this, to stop this. New technology, of course, I've already mentioned that we can perhaps use it strongly to survey and to make sure that we document properly. But at the same time, let's be aware of the limitations which we may not be aware of at the time of our need. International cooperation is key to what we do. Now, I just thought that I should indicate some of the problems which we have, particularly with illicit trafficking. In my view, is a subject which is controlled largely by experts. Largely by experts who want to ensure conformity to the Venice Charter, to the charters of the West, to UNIDROIT and all that, right? And it's us experts who do that. The common community itself is not interested in all those things. Their interest is about daily sustenance. How can this heritage object give me sustenance? Until we incorporate communities in what we do, I think our efforts might actually have a problem. I didn't mention the fact that when Macron returned the artifacts to Benin, to Cotonou, you know where they went? They went to the president's palace. How many people go to the president's palace to see the artifacts? Nobody. There's security, there's everything, right? But of course, the objects have been returned. Until communities are also part and parcel of that, I feel we need to do more in order for us to achieve a lot in this. Of course, the issue of democratizing knowledge is important. We need the digital technology, but most of our countries are far way behind. I was, a week ago, I was in Mombasa. I was supposed to do a virtual meeting. The connections could not work. So, technology already we're behind. We need to invest more in technology in order to democratize knowledge. I just want to end here by saying that, particularly from the world I come from, if we are going to succeed in terms of curtailing illicit trafficking, we need to recognize that heritage assets are also seen from a different view, from an Islamic view, not just from a Christian Western view. They have a certain objective. We also look at the world, the indigenous communities, in a different way. Why are we doing this bringing back of artifacts? It's because we always justify it. They belong to the people, right? But if the people are not part of it, I find it a little bit difficult. We need to make sure that we confront heritage with no biases of Western science. I know I grew up being told that science, you can't challenge science. It's always like that. But science, we all know, is cultural based. and also our culture needs to be there. Until we have the community itself being part of the heritage, being part of our effort to stop illicit trafficking, it is almost futile if communities and the public is not part and parcel of this. They know the artifacts, they know the tricks which are used, they know the people who are buying the artifacts. We need to make sure that they are part and parcel of this. For them to be part and parcel of that, they need to see what is the economic value of this heritage. If they see the economic value, then nobody is going to steal our artifacts. Shukran.